Mother Earth is pregnant for the third time, for y'all have knocked her up. I have tasted the maggots in the mind of the universe. I was not offended, for I knew I had to rise above it all, or drown in my own shit.
Here's a rundown. George Clinton was born in Kannapolis, North Carolina, July 22, 1940. Somehow at the age of 15, he moved to New Jersey. And within that state, Clinton got invited to work at a barbershop called the Silk Palace. He had a buddy working there who referenced Clinton, and having a friend who worked at some store back in the 1950s was enough to get a job. While working at the Silk Palace, George Clinton creates the Parliaments with 3 unnamed band members. Spontaneous drama occurs between Clinton and his crew, and they eventually split up. Instead of disbanding the entire band, Clinton replaces them with Ray Davis, Calvin Simon, Fuzzy Haskins, and Grady Thomas. These guys will remain in the lineup of George into the 70s along with several other band members, and eventually formed the bands Parliament and Funkadelic. In order to become successful, they had to cut hair for a living and doo-wop their way to fame and fortune until they got a hit single in 1967 called I Wanna Testify. Supposedly that's the full story of their early success, but it's not, as the last year, Clinton revealed the truth to his stardom.
So how old are you?
17 by this time.
You 17 years old, already running back and forth to New York.
19, I own the shop.
Is it doo-wopping, the type of singing you're doing at the time?
Yeah.
So you doo-wopping, you doing hair, you running the shop, you hitting auditions.
But when we got a hit record called I Wanna Testify. But just before we got it, I come across $1,200,000. Love just walking on me, and it's taking me
$1.2 million.
in counterfeit 20s. Somebody came to the shop, 2 little white boys running. I don't know where they got it from, but they was scared as hell. I collected about $1,800 from the hood up and down the street to stores. Gave it to them. They gave us the box of money. We used to sit in there with the coffee, dumping each bill through the coffee, and pasted it on the wall at night.
What's that?
This turns it, because it's
Oh,
brand
it look
new.
used then.
Yeah, it looked like it's green and white.
Yeah, so the coffee gives it a stain like it's
Right,
been
you
through.
balled it up, and then
Yeah.
we was plastering it on the walls. This is like from 12 o'clock to about 5 in the morning. We do this every night. And I took the last 200,000 we had we had been doing it almost a year.
Yeah.
Last 200,000 we gave it away.
So
And we got out of it and got a hit record in about a month. I Want to Testify.
what did having $1 million in counterfeit money allow you to do? I would have bought a Mercedes. I would have messed it up.
No.
Okay.
I actually started cutting sessions. I started using strings and horns, and I would pay the musician and tell them, that, it's counterfeit. Yeah. But instead of giving you the $200 or $150 for the session, I gave them $1,000, $1,500. I'm telling them, you got to
Get it off yourself.
You got to get it off yourself.
Yeah.
Because we had, like I said, we had moved so much of the money and started coming back in the barbershop.
Yeah.
And people started coming trying to get their hair cut with the $20. We can't take that.
We sit this out. We can't take this back.
This is mess. We knew the money as soon as you see it.
Yeah. So you actually used it to reinvest yourself.
Oh yeah, it was all about the music though.
So there you have it. It's about the music, not about counterfeit money. The money and record label disputes were some of the factors for Clinton's creating Funkadelic and Parliaments. At the same token, it was also the chaos of the 60s. So let's do a quick overview of the decade, and imagine living in your 20s and seeing all this happen. The Vietnam War from the 50s carries over, the space race is still going on, science fiction is becoming mainstream, John F. Kennedy just became president, Berlin Wall gets grimmer and uglier, you got Fidel Castro coming onto the international stage, a hydrogen bomb is tested by the Soviets are giving military aid in Cuba, the United States government is having a panic attack, the Cuban Missile Crisis occurs, the fear of nuclear war is a reality, and bomb shelters are now considered a possible lifestyle. Everyone thinks it's the end of the world, but luckily, peace talks emerge. Suddenly Kennedy gets assassinated, voting rights are in the picture, hippies are in the picture, LSD is in the picture, drug culture is now in, Summer of Love is in, Black liberation is in, civil rights movement joins the fray. I Have a Dream speech happens, the United Farm Workers happens, Martin Luther King is assassinated, Malcolm X is assassinated, Black Panther rises out of Oakland, protests against governments occurring around the world. And to end the decade, Apollo 11 just landed on the moon. In all that chaos, Clinton faces an ownership dispute because of bankruptcy within the record label company. As a result, Clinton loses his rights to the parliaments. Drawing inspirations from the acid heroes of the 60s, Jimi Hendrix, Sly and the Family Stone, and Frank Zappa, George Clinton creates Funkadelic in 1968. With all these factors, events, and experiences of the 60s, Clinton enters the 70s with full force. Upon entering the decade, he gains back ownership to his old band, The Parliament, renames it to Parliament, and now he owns two bands, Parliament and Funkadelic. For short, people call them P-Funk, so there you have it.
And it totally blew my mind, because I was into Motown. And so it kind of sounded like Motown, but it was like, wow, this is a little strange. It's just kind of nasty and crazy and psychedelic.
So there's a lot of juicy personal details in this golden decade for Clinton and his members, but I'll leave that to documentaries and textbooks. I'll be solely focusing on the cultural aesthetics and their music in general. Why? I think this is the decade that Parliament and Funkadelic's music has been the most sampled. As for the pink funk culture, both art and philosophy has been the most inspirational. According to the African American Music textbook by Burnham and Maltby, after integration, African Americans began to feel the pressure of losing their identity and joining their surrounding white culture. Luckily, 1970s funk music at that time began to open up social realities and fantasies, and Clinton promoted this in two ways. A self-liberation from social and cultural restriction of the US society, and the creation of new social spaces for African Americans to redefine themselves to celebrate their blackness. What's more amazing was the creation of P-Funk language and mythology. That is thanks to Pedro Bell, who heavily worked with Clinton to create the P-Funk storytelling and lyrics.
Called me up and asked me if I wanted to do the artwork for Cosmos Slop, and I said, yeah, I'm with that. And I started working on that, and then somewhere near the tail end of the project, Clinton called me up and said, Tro, why don't you write up some liner notes? And I said, for real? The liner notes too? He said, yeah, I like your writer style. Go ahead and do something up.
Pedro Bell is a paradigm shifter. In other words, before he came along, we were sort of trapped in a certain box of language, and he opened up the possibility of empowering the way black people talk. We say, dang, I went to that party and it was late than a mug, to just know that I had permission to write that.
For a cultural movement to really succeed, you just can't be revolutionary in one area. The same way hip-hop had graffiti, breakdancing, and the music. So it was a complete aesthetic revolution. Well, P-Funk had a similar kind of thing. To wear the outrageous costumes, to have the high-concept albums, to have artists like Pedro and later Overton. All these things said, this is a whole new world view.
Clinton wasn't the first to do it. He probably drew inspiration from jazz musician Sun Ra in the 1950s. Sun Ra incorporated outer space and ancient Egyptian mysticism, both philosophy and fashion, into his music. It looked like Afrofuturism was in. At the same time, nobody knew it was called Afrofuturism. That term was coined in the 90s, but the spaceships, alien worlds, Egyptian clothing, art, everybody knew they were somewhere else, but not on Earth. This has been mentioned repeatedly in most documentaries of Parliament and Funkadelic, and that is that a generation of rappers and DJs reared on P-Funk. They began to credit George Clinton and his band's music for their creations. If you're wondering how influential is George Clinton, here are some artists who have collaborated or sampled off Clinton's music within the last 30 years. I listened to older 70s work, and I think a majority of them were funk or psychedelic rock albums, and I think that's what the people at the time were in the mood for. You got to realize that the chaos of the 60s, as well as the social injustice and economic conditions, affected African American communities. Corruption, debt, societal social problems. Nobody wanted to be reminded of the poor and deteriorating conditions of the ghettos. Hence, funk was the channel and escape from social problems. It alleviated the pressures of daily life and allowed one to let go of the world just for a moment and imagine themselves to be somewhere else. So there you have it. Parliament and Funkadelic, as well as George Clinton, have certainly made a mark on African American music and culture. I'll end this project by leaving you all with a bonus clip that I found by accident. Apparently 2 of their songs were peacemaking songs amongst gang culture.
Walking into some Los Angeles neighborhoods these days is like walking into a police state. So far this week, at least 4 people have died in gang-related violence.
After the gangsters started coming to the parties, Uncle Jim Army started to slide just a little bit, but not a lot. Just a little bit, and we tried to get the gangsters under control and play more of the funk stuff that they like and not more, of the up-tempo Planet Rock stuff.
Certain records are gang records. Atomic Dog. If you put Atomic Dog on, because Crips call themselves Crip Dogs. So when you throw that on, here come the sets. They start banging. Aqua Boogie, more bounce. Doom, 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 doom. There they go.
We had a crate of records. In the very back of every crate, there was an emergency song. When we put on Flashlight, gangsters would stop fighting and that's my jam, and start throwing up their gang signs and crip walking and doing and just having fun. And I was like, Roger, how'd you figure this out? I said, the house parties. When they started acting up, I put on this song, they would stop fighting.
When we first started doing dances, the gang factor was maybe 5 or 10%.